The sun was just beginning to dip behind the city skyline, casting long shadows across the quiet street outside the dojo. Steven Seagal walked at his usual, unhurried pace, hands relaxed at his sides. His eyes scanned the surroundings, not anxiously, but with the sharp awareness of someone who had faced more danger than most could imagine. The air felt still, almost deceptively calm. From the corner of the street, a group of uniformed officers noticed him. At first, they didn't recognize who he was. To them, he was just another man walking alone, looking like he might be up to no good. One of them whispered to another, and soon they approached, their footsteps heavy on the pavement. Their tone was sharp, aggressive, thinly veiled intimidation meant to unsettle anyone in their path. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" one officer barked, stepping directly into Seagal's path. "What are you doing here?" "ID now." Seagal's calm expression didn't change. He stopped walking, nodded politely, and replied in a low, measured voice. "I'm just passing through. Is there a problem?" The officer leaned closer, voice rising, trying to assert control. "Don't smart off. We're asking the questions here. You best answer." A few bystanders began to notice. Phones were subtly raised, cameras ready to catch whatever might unfold. The tension was thick, almost tangible, like a storm waiting to break. The officers, clearly expecting compliance or fear, were met instead with stillness. Seagal didn't move aggressively. He didn't raise his voice. But the aura he exuded, quiet, controlled, unmistakably confident, made the first officer hesitate, just slightly. It was a pause that changed the energy in the street, even if only by a fraction of a second. The second officer stepped forward, trying to block Seagal's path, but the crowd had grown. People whispered, recognizing the strange calm in the middle of escalating aggression. The tension was no longer one-sided. And then, with a subtle shift of his stance, Seagal let them know without words. He was not intimidated. He was fully aware, fully prepared, and fully in control of the moment. The audience at home, or anyone witnessing this, might have thought this was a simple street confrontation. But everyone who had seen Seagal in action knew better. Something was about to happen that none of the cops, or the crowd, would ever forget. What Seagal did next shocked everyone standing there. The moment Seagal paused, the officers seemed momentarily unsure. But that uncertainty didn't last long. One of them straightened, puffing out his chest, trying to reclaim control. "You think standing there like a statue will scare us?" he sneered. "We're not impressed. Move aside or we'll make you." Seagal didn't flinch. His calm gaze met theirs, unwavering. His body relaxed, yet every muscle seemed ready to spring if needed. The air between them felt electric, charged with anticipation. The officers, used to compliance, were now unsure how to handle someone who refused to react with fear. A second officer joined, stepping close enough that Seagal could feel the heat of his body. "ID. Now. Or we'll take it ourselves." Seagal tilted his head slightly, as if considering their words, not because he was afraid, but because he knew the situation demanded careful attention. "I've shown you respect," he said softly, his voice carrying more authority than the officers had anticipated. "I expect the same in return." The officers exchanged glances. Frustration etched their faces. They hadn't expected defiance dressed in calm. They hadn't expected composure to feel so powerful. Now, their tactics escalated. One officer stepped directly in Seagal's path, blocking his way. Another attempted to lean into him, chest forward, trying to dominate the space. "We said stop. Do you understand?" one of them shouted. Seagal didn't move aggressively. He simply shifted his stance slightly, adjusting his weight in a way that subtly indicated readiness. Every move was deliberate, unhurried, a silent warning that he was aware of the danger. His calm presence began to attract attention. A few passers-by stopped, phones in hand, quietly recording the unfolding confrontation. Whispers spread through the growing crowd. "That man doesn't look scared. Who is he?" The officers, sensing the growing audience, attempted to assert dominance even more. One officer stepped closer, narrowing his eyes, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're lucky we don't teach you a lesson right here." Seagal responded with the same unshakable calm. "Violence is easy. Respect takes skill." His words, simple yet precise, seemed to hang in the air, drawing the attention of everyone around. People leaned closer, their phones now actively recording, capturing the tension that was rapidly escalating. The officers tried to provoke him further. They blocked his path again, reaching for gestures that implied they could control him physically. But Seagal didn't react with aggression. He didn't lunge. He didn't raise his fists. He simply moved with fluid precision, barely adjusting his position, maintaining both his personal space and his composure. Each subtle movement was enough to communicate awareness and control. The crowd murmured. Some whispered to their friends, "Who is this guy? No one stands up like that to cops." Others openly recorded, anticipating that something extraordinary was about to happen. As the officers grew more frustrated, their shouts became louder, almost desperate. Their faces reddened with exertion and anger. They expected fear, submission, or at least tension from Seagal, but he remained untouched by panic. He didn't match their aggression. Instead, he neutralized it with calm presence, something far more disarming than any physical action. Have you ever seen someone being bullied by authority? Comment below where you are watching from. One officer, now visibly irritated, slammed a hand against the side of the patrol car. "Enough. You're making this harder than it needs to be," he yelled. Seagal tilted his head slightly, his expression still calm. "The harder path is often the one that teaches the most," he replied, almost philosophically. His voice carried over the murmuring crowd, quiet but undeniable. The tension continued to build. Passers-by gathered, sensing an unusual confrontation that was more than ordinary. Every camera angle captured the officers' growing frustration, the crowd's rising excitement, and Seagal's unshakable calm. It became clear, the situation was no longer under the officers' control. The crowd, the recordings, and Seagal's demeanor shifted the power dynamic in subtle but undeniable ways. By now, the atmosphere was electric. What had begun as a routine attempt to intimidate a stranger had become a spectacle, a clash of aggression versus calm mastery. Every person recording sensed it. Something remarkable was about to unfold, and the cops didn't realize they were already losing control of the moment. The tension on the street had reached a fever pitch. What started as a simple attempt to intimidate a lone man had now drawn a small crowd. People whispered to each other, phones raised, recording the unusual scene. Every passerby could sense something extraordinary unfolding, a silent battle between authority and mastery, aggression and calm. The officers, frustrated by Seagal's unwavering composure, escalated their tactics. One slammed a fist against the patrol car, jostling the metal with a sharp, echoing sound. "You think you can talk to us like that?" the officer barked. "Step aside now." Seagal didn't flinch. Not physically, not mentally. He shifted his weight slightly, just enough to maintain balance and readiness, his eyes never leaving the lead officer. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, and measured. He radiated a quiet authority that made it almost impossible for the aggressors to predict his next move. The second officer tried to corner him, stepping closer with a threatening glare. "You don't know who you're messing with," he warned. His tone carried menace, the kind meant to force compliance. But Seagal, with the serenity of a master, replied, voice low and unwavering, "I know exactly who I am, and exactly what I stand for." The words were simple, but their effect was seismic. A hush fell over the crowd. People instinctively stepped back, sensing the intensity of the moment. Even the officers hesitated for a fraction of a second, caught off guard by the calm defiance that didn't match the ordinary patterns of fear or submission they were used to. Seagal's stance shifted subtly again, feet slightly apart, hands relaxed but ready, shoulders squared. He wasn't making any aggressive gestures. He didn't need to. His presence alone communicated a warning more potent than any physical attack. The crowd sensed it immediately. This wasn't just a man standing firm. This was a man who had faced far worse, and nothing in front of him could shake his resolve. One of the officers, growing impatient, raised a hand threateningly. "I said move or else." Before the threat could land, Seagal's voice cut through the tension. "Threats are for those who cannot lead with respect." The crowd gasped. Phones clicked. Even the officers instinctively froze. No one had expected words to carry such weight without aggression. It was a lesson in control, composure, and presence, all in a single calm statement. As murmurs rippled through the crowd, Seagal's eyes scanned the faces around him. He wasn't looking for allies. He wasn't challenging the audience. He was simply aware. Every twitch, every movement, every shallow breath from the cops was noted and accounted for. His calmness amplified the tension, turning the street into a pressure cooker of anticipation. The lead officer, realizing that verbal intimidation wasn't working, tried a different tactic. He stepped closer, leaning into Seagal's personal space, attempting to assert dominance through proximity. But Seagal didn't flinch. Instead, he adjusted his weight ever so slightly, maintaining balance and signaling readiness. The subtle movement spoke volumes. He was aware, capable, and completely unshaken. If you were there, would you step in or stay back? Comment calm or step in. The crowd began to murmur louder. Whispers spread. Is that Steven Seagal? Some people in the back shouted quietly, hoping to alert others without provoking the officers. One bystander even muttered into their phone, "You're not going to believe this." The officers, sensing the audience's attention, grew increasingly tense. Their aggressive posture, intended to intimidate, now looked clumsy and desperate. Every move they made reinforced the contrast between their escalating aggression and Seagal's unwavering calm. The street itself seemed to pulse with the energy of the standoff. Seagal's presence was almost magnetic. People instinctively moved slightly away, giving him space. Not because he threatened them, but because the calm intensity he projected demanded respect. The officers were losing control, and the crowd's energy only amplified it. By now, the situation had become more than a simple street confrontation. It was a performance of discipline versus arrogance, composure versus brute force. And everyone could feel it. The calm was stronger than the aggression. Everyone knew that the moment was about to turn, and when it did, it would leave a lasting impression. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, shifting from quiet whispers to audible speculation. Phones were raised, cameras filming every moment. People who had been casually walking by now stopped, forming a loose semicircle around the unfolding confrontation. Something about this encounter didn't feel ordinary. Then it happened. A bystander, squinting at Seagal's composed stance, leaned toward a friend and whispered, "Wait, isn't that Steven Seagal?" The words spread like wildfire. Within seconds, several people in the crowd recognized him. Phones were held higher, fingers pressing record, capturing what was quickly becoming a viral-worthy moment. Some gasped audibly. Others nudged friends, shaking their heads in disbelief. The cops, still focused on intimidation, hadn't yet realized the man they were bullying was a Hollywood action star, someone whose presence alone could shift any confrontation. The tension on their faces flickered briefly as they began noticing the change in energy. The crowd's attention was no longer passive. It was now actively scrutinizing every move. Seagal remained calm. He didn't acknowledge the recognition directly. He didn't flex, smirk, or attempt to leverage fame for advantage. His posture remained steady, his breathing measured. He allowed the situation to play out, aware that his composure alone carried far more authority than any boast or display of strength. The lead officer, sensing that the crowd's attention was slipping from his control, attempted to reassert dominance. "Step aside," he barked, louder this time, trying to mask the uncertainty creeping into his tone. "We're in charge here." But Seagal's calm gaze never wavered. His voice, steady and controlled, cut through the tension. "Authority doesn't demand respect. Actions do." The words struck the crowd like a shockwave. Phones captured every syllable. Gasps rose as the meaning sank in. The officer's aggressive gestures now looked increasingly desperate and uncoordinated. Their attempts to intimidate a single man, once confident and commanding, now appeared weak and chaotic against his unshakable composure. Whispers circulated among the onlookers. "That's Steven Seagal. He's a master of martial arts. If he wanted, he could take them all down instantly." The realization sent a ripple of tension through the officers, though they tried hard not to show it. They still attempted to assert control, but their movements now carried hesitation. Each step forward seemed calculated, cautious, even fearful. Seagal subtly shifted his stance. He didn't move aggressively, didn't raise a hand. But the minor adjustment communicated mastery, a readiness to respond instantly if necessary. The crowd noticed. Phones clicked. Cameras captured the subtle shift. Even without a strike, Seagal dominated the space. The lead officer tried one more intimidation tactic, leaning in, voice dripping with menace. "You think fame will protect you?" Seagal tilted his head slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of his lips. Calm, deliberate, and deadly in its restraint, he replied. "Fame doesn't protect anyone. Discipline and respect do." A collective intake of breath swept through the crowd. For a moment, the street was utterly silent, except for the subtle hum of phones recording, capturing a confrontation that had shifted entirely. The aggressors were losing control. Every bystander now sensed the turning point was near. Even those unfamiliar with Seagal's reputation felt the gravity of the moment. There was no doubt, the situation was no longer about intimidation. It was about respect, about mastery, about the undeniable presence of someone who didn't need to fight to dominate the room. The cops' confidence wavered visibly. Their shouts now carried uncertainty. Their gestures were defensive. Every second prolonged the inevitable, the moment where authority would be exposed as weak against true composure and skill. Seagal remained motionless, yet the subtle, measured shifts in his stance amplified the tension, signaling to the crowd and the officers alike that he had full control of the situation. The street, once a typical urban scene, now felt like a stage. Every camera angle, every whisper, every murmur of the crowd contributed to a climax that was about to shock everyone present. The street was electric with anticipation. The crowd pressed in slightly, some craning their necks to see, others whispering excitedly. Phones and cameras captured every moment, every subtle gesture. The officers, once confident in their attempt to bully a single man, were now acutely aware that the energy had shifted. Their authority, once unchallenged, was being undermined, not through words or weapons, but through a presence they couldn't intimidate. Seagal remained calm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step forward. Yet every inch of his stance radiated controlled power. He was measured, deliberate, and fully aware of the tension in the air. His calm was a magnet, drawing the eyes of the crowd and the focus of the officers alike. The lead officer, visibly frustrated, tried again. "Listen, you're making this complicated. Step aside." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the doubt he was trying to mask. The second officer mirrored him, leaning in, attempting to force compliance with sheer intimidation. Seagal's eyes swept across them. He spoke slowly, each word carefully chosen. "Authority is not proven through fear. Strength is not measured by intimidation. The crowd stiffened. Phones stopped for a moment in disbelief. Bystanders exchanged glances. These words, calm yet unyielding, shifted the balance entirely. The officers felt it instinctively. They could escalate, but every aggressive move now risked exposing their lack of control. The crowd began murmuring, whispers spreading like wildfire. "That's Steven Seagal. He could take them all down without lifting a hand." Some people stepped back subtly, giving him space out of instinctive respect. Others raised their phones higher, eager to capture the moment. The lead officer, realizing that his usual tactics were failing, attempted a more direct threat. "You think talking like that will save you?" he shouted, stepping closer, hands gesturing for dominance. "We could put you in cuffs right here." Seagal shifted his weight subtly, a slight pivot that signaled readiness without aggression. His voice remained steady. "You could try. But respect, control, and discipline, these cannot be forced. They must be earned." The crowd reacted immediately. Phones captured the words. Faces lit with awe. Even those unfamiliar with martial arts instinctively recognized the calm authority in his tone. The officer's aggression, once a show of power, now appeared clumsy and desperate. A woman in the crowd whispered, barely audible, "He's not just calm. He's in complete control of everything happening here." Seagal's gaze swept across the gathered crowd and the officers. Every movement he made was deliberate, every adjustment in stance measured, signaling awareness and preparedness. The officers began exchanging nervous glances. Their shouts were louder, more forced, their postures tense. The disparity between their aggression and Seagal's calm composure became impossible to ignore. Seagal continued, voice low but commanding. "Fear is a weapon for those who lack skill. Discipline is a shield for those who understand it." The crowd collectively gasped. Even the most skeptical bystanders felt the truth of his words. The officers' attempts at intimidation now only highlighted their lack of control. Their gestures faltered, eyes darting nervously as the street's energy solidified around Seagal. Every whisper, every click of a phone camera, reinforced the turning point. Seagal had transformed the confrontation. No longer was he the target, he was the center of authority. His calm, his mastery, and his presence had flipped the situation entirely. The crowd sensed it, the officers realized it, too late. Seagal's final subtle movement, a slight adjustment of his feet, hands relaxed but ready, made it clear, he was not only prepared, he was dominant. Without aggression, without a single strike, he had seized control. And in that moment, the crowd understood, the confrontation wasn't just about bullying anymore. It was about respect, skill, and authority. The balance had shifted. The officers had been outclassed. The stage was set for the next moment, the one that would shock everyone watching and leave a permanent impression on both the crowd and those attempting to assert false authority. The street had transformed. What began as a routine attempt at intimidation had become a spectacle of calm mastery versus brash aggression. The officers, once confident, were now visibly unsettled. Their gestures faltered, voices grew uneven, and every move they made betrayed the growing realization that they were no longer in control. The crowd sensed it immediately. Phones were raised, cameras recording every second, capturing a confrontation that had escalated far beyond anyone's expectation. Whispers spread through the growing circle, "He's unshakable. Who is this man?" Then, one of the bystanders, a martial arts enthusiast, leaned closer to a friend and whispered, barely above a breath, "Guys, that's Steven Seagal. The Steven Seagal." The words spread like wildfire. Recognition ignited across the crowd, and suddenly, the dynamic changed completely. People gasped audibly, pointing discreetly. Some even whispered to the officers, "You do realize who you're confronting, right?" The cops froze, though they tried hard to mask their shock. They had thought they were dealing with an ordinary man. They had expected fear, hesitation, or at least submission. Instead, they faced calm, collected, and utterly confident mastery. And now, the crowd was aware of it too. Seagal didn't smirk. He didn't flaunt his fame. His posture remained steady, his breathing measured. He understood the power of restraint, of allowing others to recognize both his skill and authority without needing to display it aggressively. One officer, realizing the situation was spiraling, tried to salvage some control. "Step aside now. You're making this harder than it needs to be." Seagal tilted his head slightly, voice low, deliberate, and commanding. "Authority is meaningless without respect. You've chosen the wrong path today." The crowd murmured in awe. Phones clicked relentlessly. Even those unfamiliar with Seagal's legendary status could sense the weight of the moment. The officers' confidence had dissolved into hesitation, their aggression now exposed as ineffective and misguided. The lead officer took a half-step back, glancing at his partner, frustration and embarrassment written across both their faces. The bystanders, emboldened by the revelation, began whispering excitedly, some recording commentary into their phones. "This is unreal. He hasn't even moved yet, and they're already shaken." Seagal's presence dominated the street. He moved subtly, just enough to signal awareness and readiness, but never with aggression. His aura alone was enough to assert authority. The officers, now fully aware of who they were dealing with, could do nothing but retreat slightly, their previous bluster evaporating under the weight of recognition. One officer tried to speak, his voice wavering. You're Seagal." Seagal's calm, measured gaze met his. "Yes," he said softly. "And I suggest you reconsider your actions before this escalates further. There's a line between authority and bullying. You crossed it." The crowd erupted quietly, a mix of gasps, applause, and murmurs of astonishment. Phones continued recording. Every angle captured the stark contrast between Seagal's composed mastery and the cop's unraveling composure. The officers' attempts to regain dominance had only highlighted their lack of control, their initial arrogance now laid bare. Seagal didn't gloat. He didn't deliver a single strike. He simply stood there, calm, composed, commanding. His message was clear: respect is earned, not demanded. True power comes from mastery, discipline, and composure, not brute force or intimidation. The officers, finally realizing the futility of their actions, slowly stepped back. Their posture slumped, their aggression gone, replaced with embarrassment and hesitation. The crowd, sensing the shift, cheered quietly, acknowledging the mastery before them. And just like that, the confrontation ended, not with violence, not with shouting, but with the quiet authority of a man who understood the true weight of presence. The street returned to a tense calm, but the impact lingered. Cameras captured the final moment. Seagal walking slowly, deliberately, leaving the officers humbled and the crowd in awe. The lesson was clear. The bullies had been exposed, and respect, not fear, had won the day. Have you ever witnessed someone calmly handling bullies? Comment yes or no. The stage was set for the final act, the viral aftermath, the lesson spreading online, and the moment that would shock everyone who saw it. By the time Seagal walked away from the street, the incident had already begun to ripple far beyond the small crowd of bystanders. Phones continued recording as onlookers whispered excitedly, sharing what they had witnessed in real time. The calm mastery and unshakable composure he had displayed had left everyone in awe. Videos uploaded within minutes went viral. Social media erupted. Clips of Seagal standing perfectly still while the officer's aggression faltered were replayed endlessly. Headlines began to appear. Steven Seagal silences bullies without a single strike. Cops intimidate Steven Seagal, then everything changes. Master of calm, how Seagal turned the tables instantly. Comment sections flooded with praise. Millions of viewers marveled at the display of control, discipline, and authority. Even those unfamiliar with martial arts instinctively recognized that what they had just witnessed was extraordinary. The officers, now fully exposed, faced scrutiny. Videos circulated that highlighted every faltering gesture, every uncertain word, and every failed attempt to intimidate. Discussions emerged online about power, respect, and authority. Social media influencers, martial artists, and everyday people analyzed the footage. Clips dissected Seagal's subtle movements, the way he shifted his stance, the calm precision that neutralized aggression without a single strike. Seagal didn't need to fight to dominate. His calm presence alone had delivered the lesson. The viral clips emphasized this over and over. Authority is not proven by intimidation. Mastery and composure command respect far more effectively than aggression ever could. Even mainstream news picked it up. Morning shows replayed the video, panel discussions debated the psychology of intimidation versus respect, and commentators marveled at how one man could command the room without raising his voice. The moral was clear: discipline and awareness outweigh brute force. The crowd who witnessed the event firsthand shared their perspectives online. Stories emerged about the initial fear they felt, and how Seagal's calm transformed the energy of the entire street. Teachers, parents, and motivational speakers began citing the incident as a lesson in leadership, restraint, and integrity. Seagal himself made no public statement immediately. He didn't gloat. He didn't boast. For him, the moment wasn't about proving his abilities. It was about reinforcing a timeless principle: respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. True authority comes from skill, patience, and composure, not from fear or threats. The cops, meanwhile, faced consequences in both public perception and professional scrutiny. Their failed intimidation, magnified by viral exposure, became a cautionary tale for anyone tempted to bully others under the guise of power. Across the internet, viewers commented, "This is how you handle bullies. Power isn't aggression, it's control and awareness." Seagal didn't need to fight, and that's what makes him unstoppable. The final images captured Seagal walking down the street, calm, collected, leaving behind the tension he had neutralized. Behind him, the crowd watched in awe. Phones were still recording, documenting a moment that would be shared, replayed, and analyzed for years to come. The story didn't just entertain, it inspired. It reminded millions that real power isn't loud. It isn't aggressive. It doesn't need to dominate through fear. Real power is calm, disciplined, and unshakable. If you believe respect is earned, not forced, type respect in the comments. Share this story, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage, discipline, and mastery. And just like that, what started as a tense confrontation between a few aggressive officers and a lone man had become a worldwide lesson in composure, respect, and true authority.